listening to The Edge, everything bass fishing, coming to you worldwide from Megaware KeelGuard Studios.
Aaron, first to kick this episode off, I want to thank you for the box of chocolates. What a great surprise. Felt the love there on Valentine's. So I still got goosebumps, man.
I know. I just could not resist. There is a surprise one in there. You'll figure it out when you go to the bathroom of which one you actually ate that had the surprise in it. So, yeah, happy to do that. And, it's Valentine's Day. We're on the backside of that. And, of course, what colors match Valentine's Day better than Megaware? The black and the red, right? And right. Of course, every single episode brought to us by Megaware, and just so many great products. All of that good stuff can be found at KeelGuard.com. First do-it-yourself keel protector, the battery guard, which is all these batteries that are getting put in the boat now, Kurt. That's liable to be a pretty large part of their business.
That is a good investment they made a couple years ago to launch that product, a product that does a fantastic job and is so important with the batteries and specifically the lithium.
Lithium, I was going to say.
Expensive, man. They need that cushion. There's a lot of parts inside that thing. So, man, Aaron, I got to say, here we are, Feb 15. We already have winners in all the national tours. You got the Pro Circuit winner a couple weeks ago. Now you've got an Elite Series winner. You've got a Bass Pro Tour winner, about 5 days ago. So lots of winners already on the horizon. We've got a classic qualifier through the Kissimmee Bassmaster Open division. And whoa, dude, it's like here we are, Feb 15, and we're at full freaking throttle.
Somebody flipped the light switch.
Oh, absolutely. It flipped quick. And you can't get away from competitive bass fishing right now. If you're into it, there's plenty going on and plenty more to come. That's for sure. Before we get into some of those conversations and picking up some of that on our future episodes here, Aaron, let's talk quickly. I heard Diana mumbling a little bit, maybe some grumbling over some swim bait purchases you jumped on here.
Yeah. She's got that alert on her debit card where, a large transaction comes through and it pings her card to make sure it's not fraud. And
she's been rung up. She was like, no, this is definitely fraud.
Yeah. And it didn't help that it was KGB. So it's like, what are you involved in now? And I've got to thank all the guys I travel with, fishing the Oak Outdoors and the, BFLs and all of that. But yeah, Chris Bunk, Matt Els, all those boys kind of have turned me now into this swim bait underground deal to where it's a cult, dude. I'm telling you, it is a cult. And, my swim bait fishing, Kurt, I love throwing a swim bait, but most of them, I will tell you, have been kind of with the Kitech, just the soft swim bait, those kinds of things. Well, now I ended up ordering some these glide baits and
the hard baits.
Yeah, the hard baits,
now you're into the dollars.
Yeah, I'm like, how can I tie on something that's cost $250 and go out there and chuck it where I like to throw it around trees and that? So anyway, I'm gonna see if I can have you come up and get your scuba certification in case I tie one up in a tree. You can go down and get it for me.
Well, I will definitely do that. I'll also be awaiting those big bass photos with the success that you're going to have on those swim baits.
Well, man,
too.
I hope so. Like I said, I have not. This is going to be my first go at this kind of stuff on using these kind of swim baits. But I'm excited. I really do love throwing them. I know a lot of guys, really catch them on it. And so we'll see. Time will tell, right?
Well, everybody's going to have to continue to stay tuned on to our BassEdge Instagram page and Facebook page. And we'll be giving some updates on the swim bait chronicles of Aaron Martin.
Yeah. Otherwise, they might all wind up in a case shadow box on the wall, instead of having a fish mounted. I'll just put expensive swim baits up there.
Maybe we'll add a tab to the BassEdge website. It'll be the garage sale tab. We'll have fantastic swim baits, 50% off.
Yeah, exactly.
That might be a good idea. We should add a tab to the site. There's so many great tabs already. Awesome articles, some great videos that we posted for years. So encourage everybody to check out that.
And your signature series, Richardson 112.
That is correct. Don't forget the apparel. We got some great apparel on there. And, we're just always doing fun stuff here. That's what we do at BassEdge. We do fun stuff. And maybe leading into some more fun stuff, we're going to have a ProtectTheHarvest.com tackle tip coming your way right now. And right after that, we're going to continue this Seg B 2022 kind of continuation of new guests with new insights to things all bass fishing, Bass Fishing Archives. It's going to be a fun conversation too. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Bass Edge Radio. This episode's ProtectTheHarvest.com tackle tip with MLF Bass Pro Tour angler Dakota Ebert.
All right, guys, talk a little about winter cranking today. You know, my thing is that, like, I want to imitate a certain type of forage, right? So if I'm going down, let's say, a section of riprap, you know, I'm going to be imitating a crawfish there. If it's cold, I may not be cranking really fast, right? I might be kind of slowing down, just kind of crawling that crankbait through there. But here, like maybe at Rayburn, a place maybe where I'm trying to imitate a gizzard shad, right? I'm throwing a 6XD, I'm throwing a bigger profile bait. I'm not really concerned as much about the depth as I am, you know, the size of the bait that I'm trying to imitate. So the other thing to take into consideration is that a lot of people really think about cranking in the wintertime, you want to like slow down, right? Fish are kind of lethargic. Well, there's a portion of a group of fish that really just key in on thinking on gizzard shad a lot of times. Those gizzard shad are very quick moving fish. They move fast. They never stop moving. So I'm going to be burning that crankbait, you know, in those type situations. Even when it's super cold, I'm still going to be burning that crankbait to get those reaction bites. You just got to feel out the situation. Every day's a little bit different. And, you know, but cranking in cold weather conditions can be really, really, really efficient. You just got to figure out, you know, what kind of forage you're trying to imitate, what kind of structure you fishing, and then go from there and make the adjustments, and you have a lot of success doing it.
Great tip, Dakota. Brought to you by ProtectTheHarvest.com.
First by land and now by sea. For years, Lucas Oil has been a staple in high-performance vehicles on both the road and track. Now, from the makers of Lucas Oil comes Lucas Marine products, specifically engineered for marine applications. Protect and lubricate your marine inboard, outboard, or high-performance boat with Lucas Marine Engine Oil or Lucas Synthetic-Based Oil. Learn more about the complete line of Lucas Oil and marine products. Visit lucasoil.com.
Nitro Performance Bass Boats. Get pro-level performance with the Nitro Z18, the official boat of Major League Fishing. The Z18, with its nimble handling and versatility, sports many of the features in the larger boats in the line, like a Guardian Live Well, a heavily insulated cooler, dual 8-foot rod storage, and our smooth and fast NVT hull. Every Nitro boat is laid out to do one thing very well: catch fish. Enormous front decks, up to 45 square feet on the Z21, allow maximum mobility when battling unruly bass, and feature low-profile gunnels for ease of skipping, pitching, flipping, or landing fish. Nitro Performance Bass Boats, pure fishing machines.
Aaron, this is a pretty cool deal. I believe more people need to enjoy, and quite frankly, many anglers probably aren't even aware that this site exists. Bass Fishing Archives. It's www.bass-archives.com, the source for bass fishing history, basically, in my opinion. Man, I was lucky enough to meet Terry Battisti through a mutual friendship many, many years ago, and he's compiled some serious bass fishing history. Awesome to have him as a special guest on this episode. Welcome to Bass Edge, Terry.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Kurt. Yeah, it's been a while since we talked, hasn't it?
It's been a long time. Last time we chatted, you were on the west side. Now you're over there in Tennessee. So a lot of things have changed for sure.
Yeah. I was in Idaho, and back in 2013, I moved from Idaho to North Carolina, and now I'm in Tennessee now. So it's nice to be in the East.
Wow.
More centralic bass fishing history maybe in that area too, right?
Oh, it's the cradle of bass fishing here. You know,
Absolutely.
North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama. I mean, you can't get much closer to where it was born out of. So, yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and, speaking of that nucleus, Terry, I now understand where Kurt gets all of his data and all of the archives to talk about things. Here, I just thought he was smart, but he has this, source of you that for some reason I didn't even know existed. But I do want to ask, when did this begin, and kind of what exactly, I guess, drove your passion for bass fishing history?
Well, I've been kind of a nerd my whole life. I grew up in a tackle store. I started working there when I was 14. I started going in there way before that. And it was an old school private owner tackle store where all the sticks from around the area would come in. And I'm talking Mike Folkstad and Don Iovino and Rip Nunnery. I'm talking old Western studs. And I just love to sit around and listen to the stories that these guys had, like Rip Nunnery's 15 fish limit that went 98 pounds, 15 ounces that he caught out of Eufaula in 1969 for a Bassmaster event. That'll never be broken. Well, those fish were in the tackle store that I worked at. So it was like 1978 when I worked there, but Bob's had been open since 76 and did a lot of reel repair, rod repair. And so there was a lot of old stuff around, and I just fell in love with it. And I kind of guess I geek out on it ever since. You know, it's just part of me, so to say. So that's how I got into the history. And then back, I don't know, Pete Robbins is the one that kind of ruined this for me.
Pete is how we connected too, right? So it kind of all comes full circle right here for you and I.
Exactly. So Pete and I meet on the internet, you know, a nice romance there, in 1997 or 1998 on the Bass Fishing homepage. And at that time, I had a hand fork company, and we just developed this friendship. Well, I started writing in 2000. I got him into writing in about 2003 or 2004, you know, on a national basis. And he knew that I grew up in the West and I had Western ties and history, you know, and all that stuff. And he kept bugging me to write a book. And it's like, yeah, no, dude, I don't want to write a book because I'm going to leave someone out, or I'm going to leave something out. Someone's going to get pissed off. You're bound by the two covers, the front cover and the back cover. And there's no way to ever go back in and put something else in it. So I, you know, kind of poo-pooed that. And finally, I was about 2010, I was down in my basement moving some stuff around, and I found a 1974 California Lunker Club newsletter that had been given to me in the early 80s by Rip Nunnery. And I was like, holy crap, I stopped at what I was doing. I read the 24-page newsletter cover to cover. I went to work the next day. I scanned it. I sent to Pete. And the only words in the email were, you need to do a history of the Western United States bass fishing deal.
He started prodding you again immediately.
Yeah. He's poking me. He's really good at that. It's like, dude, you don't understand. To write a book, you're putting yourself in a corner. So it was literally maybe a month later, I was down in Alabama in Huntsville working, and I had dinner with Alan Clemens. And Clemens evidently had been talking to Pete. And so the whole dinner time, Alan's bugging me about doing this. And, you know, it's like, guys, leave me alone. And I get back to the hotel that night. Clemens calls me up and says, why don't you do a blog? And then it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so between late 2010, 2011, you know, kind of putting it together in my mind, I told Pete and Alan that I would only do it if they would help me.
There you go. Snap right back on them.
Exactly. And then by the end of 2011, I was starting to get the website, you know, all the domain names and all that stuff done. And come March 2012, we launched. And of course, Clemens backed out. But it was Pete and I. And
thrown under the bus immediately. I love it.
Exactly. Yeah. You hear that, Alan? Anyway, yeah, we ran it, and it was going good. And then in 2013, I left Idaho and I went to work for the Department of Defense in North Carolina, and they didn't like it. They didn't like me having an internet presence. They didn't like me having a social media presence. And I fought them for 2 years. And finally, in 2015, I had some other things happen, and not just my employer bothering me to get off. And I just walked away from it in mid 2015.
Different obstacles in life occur. Yes, it makes sense.
Yeah. And I think, Kurt, you know who I used to work for. So, you know. Anyway, so in 2020, it was like June or July 2020, I get a random call from Pete, and he says, hey, the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame wants you to start the website up again. And at that point, I had left North Carolina. I was now back working for the Department of Energy, and I had time, and I had an employer that didn't care if I was, you know, on Facebook or Twitter or what have you.
Super cool. And here we are. Yeah,
and here we are. Yeah, so it worked out. You know, it just that 6-7 years span in between there just killed me with respect to people knowing who the heck I am.
It's funny how some of these things work. You know, it's similar to anglers, right? Like Aaron and I, how we connected and you know, through BassEdge, and it was a TV show, and then things just continue to morph. It's very similar to this particular website and this cool thing in the sport of bass fishing is that, it comes out of a thought process, and then it takes a couple years to get things, as you might say, engineered or together. And then now somebody grabbed the hold of, hey, we really need this in the sport. You kind of get this backing with the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. And now it's at a whole new level that maybe before we could have never been at. So it's that's why it's super cool. And I wanted to make sure we brought this to more people's attention, Terry. I mean, you just get lost in this website, in my opinion. You start seeing some of the old ads and a lot of the old articles. And I know you got another writer too that helps you through, getting some things together on here, or that they've written it in the past. And it's just crazy interesting. Let's talk about some of those articles real quick. You post up on the site. Do you have a little bit of background of how you come in contact with some of these old pieces? And secondarily, do you have a favorite that you'd like to just kind of shed some quick light here on the podcast to kind of draw people in, to give them an idea of the content on the site?
Yeah, so every article on the site, I would say 99% of them are written by me and my partner, Brian Waldman. Brian's a geek out of Indiana. And there was one thing about Pete, Brian, and I is that, and more so Pete and Brian, they're like Rain Men when it comes to bass fishing data. I mean, it's
like
just,
they're like Ken Duke also, right? Yeah, he's another Rain Man.
Right. Yeah. So, and Duke will throw something our way every once in a while, but we don't copy, articles out of Bassmaster or one of the old magazines and post them to the website. We do the research based on those magazines and old books and stuff like that. And then we write our own one-off articles describing this stuff. And so, for example, where do I get these ideas from? I have every issue of Bassmaster ever published. Okay.
Nice.
That's starting from the spring of 1967. And if you want to see me go through that issue, I actually have a deal worked out with Bassmaster. I videoed it and recorded it and put it on our YouTube channel. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, maybe.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, I have every issue of Bassmaster, every issue of In Fisherman, every issue of Fishing Facts magazine, a whole lot of catalogs. Like I'm looking at my Garcia Fishing Annuals here from 1965 to 1979. You talk about all sorts of other industry catalogs and Bass Pro Shops. And I mean, I have it all. My library's got 8 5-foot bookcases in it, and they're all filled. And I have a whole bunch of boxes in the center of the room still that, yeah, it's crazy. So, what I try to do is I try to take a year at a time. I'll go through all the magazines I have for that year. I'll go through the catalogs that I have for that year, and I'll research multiple subjects. And I'm trying to put it up there kind of chronologically in some cases, so it makes some sense and things like that. But when it comes to like my favorite series of articles that I've done, it has to be The Birth of Flipping and The Birth of the Flipping Stick. To me, that is the most comprehensive article ever written on how flipping was developed. And then also there's a kind of an offshoot series on the birth of the flipping stick, because the flipping stick was built specifically for Thomas and what he was doing. And the design of that blank has never been duplicated to this day.
Right. You're talking about D. Thomas, the father of flipping and pitching, that grew up out there on the Delta. Again, kind of tapping into your West Coast roots there, I think, right?
Yeah. So there's 4 articles on flipping itself. The first one is an article titled, I believe, is a new concept in fishing, controlled structure fishing is what Thomas initially called it in that original 1974 California Lunker Club newsletter that I had that got this whole thing started.
Right.
And so he called it controlled structure fishing. So that was the name of the first one. And then I had a 3-part series where I interviewed Thomas, Dave Myers, who was working for Fenwick at the time that him and Thomas developed the flipping stick. Interviewed Gary Klein, Basil Bacon, Hank Parker, and Denny Brower. I tried to get a hold of Glebe at the time, but I couldn't track him down because D. Thomas took it to Bull Shoals in 75. Glebe took it, and then D never went back east again. But Glebe went and just destroyed everybody in 76, 77, 78, 79. I mean, he made 3 or 4 classics in the late 70s, early 80s, all on flipping when still nobody was doing it.
Right.
Then there's a couple of articles on how the actual flipping stick was developed itself. So, here's one technique and a whole bunch of different pieces written on, talking about how that whole technique in the rod was put together.
I love it. I got to check that whole thing out. I haven't looked at that piece yet. So that's awesome. I like
cool.
it.
Hey, guys.
Just go and use the search function and type in flipping, and it'll all come up right there at your fingertips.
Terry, the content of the site is so diverse. I mean, so much stuff on there, and it's just been really, really exciting for me to not only read and follow the site, but then get to talk with you in person to learn about the site. And I certainly look forward to visiting it more frequently. But quickly before we go, what is kind of the site address, and do you provide social media alternative as well? Can you kind of give us all things Bass Archives of how people can stay up to speed with what you've got going on?
Yeah, no problem. First off, I want to thank you and Kurt for having me on this morning. I mean, this is awesome. Appreciate
absolutely.
what you guys are doing. But yeah, with respect to the site, so the website again can be found at bass-archives.com, and we're posting between 5 and 7 new pieces a week, usually in the morning at 6:30 is when a new post will launch. And then Thursday and Friday, we're doing like a throwback Thursday like everybody does, and a Friday finale. Those are 2 kind of shorts. Saturday is what we're aiming for video-wise. Video will drop on YouTube, and then that automatically gets fed to the website. And then Sunday, we kick off the week again with another full feature. And then we have not just the YouTube channel, we have Instagram, and I try to post at least once a day on that. Usually by the end of the week, we've hit it 5 times that week. And what we're doing is we're taking the pictures from the articles that we posted that week and posting them onto Instagram. You'd be amazed at how many people look at Instagram and don't go to the website or don't know about the website. So that's how we're handling that, to try to drive people from Instagram to go read the site. And then we have Facebook. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's probably one of the coolest things is that you're taking all this history, putting it available on all these different types of, current obvious platform, whether it's website or Facebook or Instagram and YouTube, and I've seen some of these YouTube videos, and it's cool how you kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of these things. Obviously reading is one way, but then visually just watching YouTube, it's a totally different approach. And I think that's pretty cool. I wanted to mention my favorite aspect of the site, Terry, is the gimmick bass tackle. That's a super cool piece. I saw this spinning rod that basically was formulated out of a pistol grip, which anybody, in the 70s know that was the grip that we all, that a lot of people started with was the pistol grip. And they turned it into a freaking spinning rod handle. I was like, what? And obviously it didn't take off, right?
Yeah, there's just sometimes some things that come through your mind you shouldn't put on paper and even develop. I mean, it's crazy.
It is cool. Especially because it was like a full page ad, and that was even the best.
Oh, and the crazy thing is that, I mean, that ad was in every single magazine for almost 2 years. And yeah, I just don't get it.
Okay. Yeah. Man, this has been fun. It's great to go back through, look at a lot of these things. Again, Bass Fishing Archives, the history of bass fishing online, available to you. So many touch points. Obviously, the website. The Instagram is just Bass Fishing Archives. If folks want to just search that on their Instagram account, it's Bass Fishing Archives. But Terry, thank you so much for being with us today. Any final closing thoughts before we move on to our Lucas Oil Angler Spotlight section with Brock Mosley here in just a moment?
Yeah, nothing, guys. I really appreciate you having me on BassEdge, and look forward to talking to you sometime soon, and maybe seeing you guys at the Classic.
Absolutely. I will be there, so hopefully I'll see you there, and maybe we can catch up with Pete, and maybe Alan will show up too. It's not too far away, and we'll have a good little meeting there. That'd be awesome. So
sounds good, man.
All right, everybody stay tuned. BassEdge Radio will be right back with Aaron and I, and we're going to go into the Lucas Oil Angler Spotlight. Hang tight.
This is Evergreen Pro Staff Justin Kerr.
This is MLS BPT angler Jacob Wheeler.
This is professional angler Denny Brower.
I'm BASS Elite Series Angler of the Year Seth Spider.
This is BASS Elite Series Rookie of the Year Josh Strassner on BassEdge Radio.
You know the importance of protecting your investments, so why use anything else other than the original and toughest DIY keel protector for your boat, Megaware KeelGuard. Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our exclusive contoured edge and patented technology. Megaware KeelGuard keel protectors are made tough and made to stick. Their do-it-yourself installation takes less than an hour, providing the longest-lasting, most dependable keel protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Developed specifically by boat builders offering the best keel protection in the industry. Also from Megaware KeelGuard, SkedGuard, FlexStep Pro, and Pontoon Guard. So give your boat the performance edge. Put on the protection the pros pick. Megaware KeelGuard.
And brother, I'm pumped today to feature an angler who's had what I would consider a hot hand over the last 3 seasons of the Bassmaster Elite Series. Seems Brock is punching the time clock consistently, and he's become a regular in the check line. He's been flirting with an Elite Series win on several occasions the past 2 years as well. Glad to have on the show BASS Elite Series Pro, Brock Mosley. Thanks for being with us today on Bass Edge, Brock.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you guys having me on, and looking forward to being on the show with you guys.
Well, like Kurt said, great to have you on here. Brock, since 2019, I mean, you have been extremely consistent in your Elite Series performances. Can you kind of break down or pinpoint, if that's possible, that moment or period of time that, you know, it just started clicking? You kind of began to understand or become repetitive in a process that really has just, I think, almost created a kind of a comfort level and confidence for you.
You know, I kind of went through the same thing growing up playing sports, playing baseball. I played, you know, all through junior high, high school, and 3 years in college. And I kind of went through the same thing every time I stepped up a level. I mean, you know, I starting varsity my freshman year of high school, definitely my sophomore year. And every time, you know, you bump up a level, it would take me a little while to kind of get comfortable. And fishing has been kind of no different, from fishing weekend tournaments, BFLs, opens, all the way to the elites. You know, it just kind of takes me a little bit of time to get comfortable. And, you know, with being on the elites, you know, learning how to practice, break down a body of water in 2.5 days. And then, you know, all the distractions that comes with it. Kurt can tell you there's just a lot going on other than just catching fish. So
absolutely,
it just took me a little time to just kind of get used to everything and get comfortable. That's the best word for it. And then, of course, you know, just growing as sponsors start to come along makes it easier, less stressful. And, you know, it's just been, the last 3 years have been good. You know, I'm getting kind of to my old self. Don't really see myself as a winning type angler where I'm going to go win a bunch of tournaments, but I try to base myself off of consistency, and I want to be as consistent as possible.
Well, Brock, it seems like that consistently is providing some opportunities for you to step on that podium, you know, winning some Elite Series events. You've had several second place finishes now, been in contention. And I know how the game works. Even some events where you weren't quite there in the top 10, you knew you probably had a chance to win based on an adjustment or two, a fish or two throughout, you know, a week of an event, because there's so much, as you say, that goes on there. Man, I see you really, as you mentioned, through your baseball progression, through the same thing in all of your stats, from the open level to once you got on the Elite Series. And then I feel like that coming out party at the St. Lawrence when you were jacking them on the Ned rig was a big deal. And that kind of led into some more confidence for you, kind of really saw you beam into that event. If it wasn't for Kevin catching that 6 freaking pounder, you know, then you could have been the guy walking away with that elite win in that particular event. I think that was in 2019, 18 or 19.
17.
Was it 17?
You know, that was a year that did a lot of good to my confidence.
Right.
That was my second year on tour and kind of getting the hang of things. And I actually had 2 seconds. One was at St. Lawrence, and then 2 events later, I had another second to Jason Christie on Lake St. Clair.
Right.
And St. Clair to me was a better opportunity for me to win, because Kevin ended up putting it to all of us at St. Lawrence that year.
Right.
I think he beat me by like 7 pounds, and I just beat everybody else. So, you know, it does a lot as a young angler to finish second, especially to Kevin Van Dam and to Jason Christie, 2 of which you can argue the best in the business. And,
sure,
you know, that did a lot to my confidence, and then it just continues to grow, you know, over the years. And, the more comfortable you get, the better you get at progressing things.
Yeah, well, it seemed pretty obvious looking through the stats, right? I mean, through the 2019 season, after you kind of mentioned you started getting that confidence, you made the Classic in 2020, made the Classic again in 2021, and had a pretty good finish there at Lake Ray Roberts, so outside of Dallas. Now again, you're coming up with another Classic at Lake Hartwell in 2022 after another solid outing, as far as a season perspective in 2021. So where do you see as the next step in your process of this kind of competitive development that we've kind of established with your growth here? How do you feel like you can improve to take it up to the next notch? I know you're buddies with Hank Cherry, and you see him win some back-to-back Classics, and he's had some opportunities. Other friends of yours on tour, you see them walking across the stage with a blue trophy. Where's Brock's next process of step in this competitive development that you see?
Especially just being a guy that used to play a lot of sports, you always start the season with goals, and that's the same with bass fishing. And the last few years, my main goal to start the season is try to win Angler of the Year. And unfortunately, St. John's River, so to speak, kind of take
the nail in the side. Right?
Yeah, very quickly. And in 2020, I think I finished fourth in the points and finished just 15 points out of Angler of the Year. And, that's just due to one bad event at the St. John's River. And last year in 2021, the kind of the same deal. I ended up 14th last year, but I had one other bad finish. And, one thing I have to do is figure out how to do away with those bad finishes. And, last year, especially, I had probably the best practice I've ever had at St. John's River. And then every year we have an off day because it's our first event of the year for media purposes. And everything got warm and everything changed, and I just wasn't able to adjust. And for me to take that next step, that's just what I got to work on, is how to prevent those bomb finishes. And that's kind of what I'm lacking. I had, I think, 4 top 10s last year on the elites, and this wasn't good enough to get inside the top 10 in points. And that's due to 2 bad finishes. And, for me as an angler, like I said earlier, I want to be as consistent as possible. And one thing I have to do is, like I said, be able to adjust quicker on some of those events. Last year was St. John's and Gunnersville, which is kind of odd because I usually, I don't do great at Gunnersville, but I usually do decent. And, I just never really figured anything out there, and that's just on me. And main thing for my career goals, I want an Angler of the Year. I want a Classic trophy like everybody else, but I want to be one of those anglers when I retire that says I fished 12 to 15 Bassmaster Classics, because there's only a handful of anglers that do that, and that's a special group to be a part of, and that's kind of where I want to see myself in 10, 15 years.
The more you fish, the more chances you got to win, right?
That's a good goal.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I don't see myself as a winner. If it happens, it just happens. It's just one of them things where everything falls into place. I have been close. I think I've got 4 seconds on the elites now. And every time it's just one of them deals where everything just kind of falls into place and kind of flows with it. And I've always been the kind of angler that just kind of goes on the water and just kind of flows with it. I don't necessarily find the best stuff on the lake that, people find when they win. It's just, I just kind of go out there and go fishing every day. One thing I kind of picked up from Andy Morgan, and when I fished with him one time, and, he hasn't won very much as far as tournament goes, but he's got a mantle full of Angler of the Year trophies.
Yes, he does.
I think I'll take those trophies over a blue one.
Brock, here we are, kind of middle part of February. I know you spend a lot of time in a deer stand, and I think that kind of ended for you a week or 2 ago. Just kind of curious. I also saw on your social media that you were able to pre-practice for your first couple of big events in 2022. Now that bass fishing is back in the primary focus, what techniques do you generally rely on early in the year to locate late winter pre-spawn bass there in your home state of Mississippi?
I always tell people to fish, their strengths, and one thing they're most confident in. And, one thing I'm real confident in, no matter where I go across the country, whether it's here in Mississippi or even in New York, is throwing a chatterbait. And especially these shallow Mississippi lakes where the fish they'll get pre-spawn mode here in February and March, and they'll start pulling up. And we have a lot of lily pad fields, a lot of grass clumps, stuff like that. And it's a good way to kind of cover water and to find those groups of fish. And that's one thing I like to do is throw chatterbaits, throw swim baits, stuff like that on these shallow flats here in Mississippi to kind of find these pre-spawners and as they're moving up onto the bed. And, it can be a lot of fun, the fish here in the South, and especially Mississippi in February and March.
Brock, you mentioned the shallow water angling there in Mississippi. Typically, kind of really flat lakes lack a great contour changes. Actually, I would say, real similar to Florida fishing there, where the 22 Elite season is going to kick off once again. How will you identify fish and what they're going to relate to if they haven't really moved up to shoreline cover yet?
A lot of these Mississippi lakes are real shallow and real flat. And one thing these fish key on is ditches. These ditches and creeks are their highways in and out of these shallow backwaters. Because, here where I'm from, we don't have a whole lot of clean water. So if you can find that little bit of clean water, that's generally where your fish are going to go try to spawn, especially if it's got a hard bottom. And paying attention to these ditches and creeks, it don't even have to be a deep ditch, just something that's maybe a 6-inch contour change, just a little dip in the flat where these fish will go in and out. And that's one thing I like to key on that. And we have a lot of stumps and a lot of laydowns in the water. And that's kind of what the fish like to kind of stage on as they're pulling up, getting closer to that backwater to where the clean water is. They'll like to pull up on these stumps. If you got a ditch that's got stumps on the edge of it, which a lot of these around here do, man, that's going to be your key highway for them fish to move in and out and to have a stopping point as they're making their way back to these clean waters to spawn.
How does that, with the live sonar technology, are you able to use that much in shallow water to kind of, locate some of these stumps, 20, 30, 40, 50 feet ahead of the boat and target them as you're kind of cruising down maybe a ditch that you're not real familiar with? Is that doable for you? Do you utilize that technology in that shallow water like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing I like to do, especially in shallow water, is, I'm a Garmin guy. I use live scope a lot. And one thing I do with my live scope is I won't keep my range 100 feet out, because to me, if you got your range over 65, 70 feet on your live scope, it's hard to make an accurate cast, past that kind of point.
Right.
And if I got that my range on, 65 or 70 and I can see a stump, well, that stump's only 50 foot, I can make an accurate cast 50 foot pretty consistently. And that's one thing I like to try to do, especially just easing my way through these creeks and ditches and drains that'll have that structure on the side of it. It don't matter if it's, 3 or 4 foot, I can still see that stump ahead of me, and make an accurate cast with my range, maybe not quite as far out as I would in, say, 18 to 20 foot deep water, when I'll have it out to over 100.
Sure. Great stuff. Great use of that technology. And you always kind of hear some people shy about using it in shallower water. So it's great to hear coming from an expert like yourself that it's doing you a lot of good and putting some more fish in the boat. Aaron and Brock, let's Powerpull down for a quick pause in the action. Stand by. BassEdge Radio will return with more from BASS Elite Series angler Brock Mosley.
Patented in 2000, perfected over years of testing and real-world punishment, the Powerpull is the ultimate shallow water boat positioning tool. Swift, Powerpull deploys in seconds from anywhere in your boat. Virtually silent, Powerpull won't spook wary fish. Secure in strong current or gusting winds in up to 8 feet of water. Engineered to take it with a lifetime unconditional replacement guarantee on the spike. Powerpull, swift, silent, secure. Visit powerpull.com to find a dealer near you.
BassEdge, presented in part by Mercury Marine, Go Boldly, returns with BASS Elite Series angler Brock Mosley in the Lucas Oil Angler Spotlight. That's right, Lucas Oil High Performance Marine Products. Be sure to visit the BassEdge.com store for all things Lucas. It works.
Well, Brock, let's continue to dive in, discuss some of these pre-spawn fishing conditions, how you like to approach them. Specifically, let's get into the techniques and something that we talk a little bit about here on BassEdge, which is speed. I think it's really important. Want to hear your take on speed during this pre-spawn, kind of behavioral pattern time frame, late winter pre-spawn. Do you find yourself as a speedster kind of throwing that trolling motor on 6, 7, or 8 and ripping down the bank, covering lots of water? Or do you tend to try to attack this time of year slower, kind of a more methodical approach? And then what lures will help you achieve whichever decision you're making on style of speed that you're working your boat down in those typical areas?
That's how I want to fish. I like to cover water and fish as fast as possible. But sometimes this time of year, these pre-spawners, especially in Florida, that's not the way to go. It's always a great way to locate some fish, but especially in Florida, they like it slow. Whether you're dragging a worm or throwing a Cinco, seems like the slower you present your bait, the better. And that kind of kills me. Like, that's really hard for me to do, even though it's the best thing to do. Now, me at home, I like to cover water. Like you said, I'll keep my troll motor, on 5 or 6 and just go and throw in a chatterbait or a swim bait and just try to find those little pods of fish or groups of stretches of bank that those fish are keying on or backwaters. And then once I find them, that's when I'll slow down and maybe drag a Cinco or a worm and kind of pick it apart, because some of these pre-spawn fish can be funny. You can throw too far to the left or right of them, 2 or 3 foot, and they not bite. So sometimes really slowing down your presentation can really help in this pre-spawn time of year, for me at least.
Is there some particular baits that you feel like will help you enable that slower, methodical presentation or that higher speed presentation, or do you still kind of utilize the same things but just basically kill the trolling motor back?
I'll go as far as power pulling down and fan casting, and say if I'm on a flat that they're pulling up on. And, there'll be times where I won't even pick my poles up for 10 minutes and I'll just be casting around the clock. I like a Cinco this time of year. I even like a swimming Cinco. And what I'll do is, depending on how the fish are reacting to it, if they're wanting it really slow, I'll put a tiniest weight I can put on there, a 1/8 type weight with that swimming Cinco, so I can reel it slow. If they want it faster, then I can up my weight to, a 3/8 even. Something I can reel a lot quicker. But pre-spawn fish are always kind of funny. You kind of have to let them tell you how they want their bait. Each day is different. Some days you got a warmer day where the sun's beaming down and warming that water up. They get real active and, feeling it. They're ready to do their thing. But some days it's kind of cloudy and overcast and it's not as warm, but they're still up there in the pre-spawn in their staging spot. They may not want it as quick. So you kind of really have to let the fish tell you how they want it this time of year.
Yeah, for sure. And, that leads me to kind of a thought, Brock. A challenge for a lot of anglers is breaking down a body of water. So, when you are approaching, whether you're on your way there or once you get to the lake, curious to kind of dive into your psyche on how you do that. Are you going to pick a particular section of the fishery? Do you try and cover the whole thing? And then also, if you could just talk just a bit on, is that something that you're doing on your way there, or is that more of an on-the-fly calling an audible after you launch the boat and kind of get a feel for what's going on?
That's kind of the reason why I like to go pre-fish or scout a lake if I've never been there before off limits. All of our lakes go off limits 4 weeks prior to our first day of practice. And if I've never been there, I want to go and see the whole lake, not necessarily fish, but just see it and have in my mind what I can expect to see when I come back in a month. And to tell somebody to try to break down a whole lake in 2.5 days, that's nearly impossible. So the main thing I try to do when I go to a place is catch them the way I want to catch them or I'm comfortable catching them. I don't want to go to a lake and try to catch them tight line or, some way I'm not familiar with or very comfortable with. I'm not a big jerk bait thrower because here in Mississippi, our waters for the most part is too dirty to throw a jerk bait well.
Digging in the dirt.
I travel with one of the best jerk bait throwers on the planet, and we'll go to a lake and he's catching them jerking. Well, just because he's catching them jerking don't mean everybody else can catch them jerking. He's just that good at it. But if he's out there and he's really catching them, then, that'll give me the confidence to, hey, let's try it, picking up a jerk bait and throwing it a while. But, the main thing I try to do is catch them away I'm comfortable catching them and confident in catching them everywhere I go. Not necessarily the same way every lake, but just for me, I love a chatterbait. Everywhere I go, I got a chatterbait tied on. And I think every tournament I had last year, I weighed at least one fish on a chatterbait, even up north. So it's just one of them deals where I try to catch them the way I'm most comfortable. And that's a big deal, is having confidence in what you're doing when you're on the water.
Absolutely. Talking about early spring and pressure, you get into some areas of the lake that, they just look right and the fish just use them consistently and they become community areas, or just areas that, for a particular spring, the fish just are traveling that ditch or that drain into this XYZ backwater somewhere. And, it starts getting a lot of pressure. Are you typically an angler that tries to shy away from pressured areas in the spring? Or if it's going to go down there, do you just deal with the crowds and kind of fish within them?
It really depends on the size of field I'm fishing up against. For instance, if I'm fishing an open and it's got 225 boats, pretty good chance you're not going to find something and have it completely to yourself, with that many boats. If I'm fishing the elites and there's only 90 or 95 boats, those guys are the best in the world, and you're not going to find anything and have it to yourself, but you're not going to be sharing it with 8 or 10 guys, chances are, especially on a big body of water. 95 boats isn't a lot if we're on a big body of water. But so to speak, in the opens, one thing I try to do in the opens, and I heard Greg Hackney say this one time, he said, if you find the best thing on the lake, you're not going to be able to maximize its potential when you're sharing it with 2 or 3 other guys. But if you can find something that's not very good and maximize the potential of it, you can have a really good tournament that way. And it really started making sense to me a couple of years ago, after, letting that sink in. And that's what I started doing in the opens last year. For instance, on Grand Lake in October, 200 something boats on Grand Lake is a lot. I mean, you can't have a stretch of docks and nobody else fishing.
Right.
So
you and 5 other boats got a stretch of docks, right?
Yeah. So what I literally started doing was running down the lake looking for the ugliest bank possible that nobody else would touch. And I think I finished 5th in that open, and that's all I did was making the ugliest stuff on the lake work. And it just so happened it worked out that time. So there's different, answers to that question. There's going to be times where you got to fish those pressured areas. The fish are grouped up, and that's where they're at. And that's when I try to get a little more finessey with them, whether it's a wacky rig or a Nico rig or a drop shot, something to kind of just make it work for that event and to survive.
You bring up a good point there, and quickly before Kurt takes us to the listener question, I do want to throw this out there on the pressure topic, Brock. When you do find yourself, like you said, sometimes you can't stay away from those pressured areas. Do you kind of pay attention to what other anglers in front of you or around you are throwing and then steer away from that and offer something different? Or you just kind of jump right in there and not worry too much about what others are doing?
Man, in this sport, Kurt can tell you, it's best sometimes it's like you got to have blinders on to where you're zeroed in on what you're doing and you have to tune everybody else out. I mean, there's been elite events, St. John's River, for instance, when on Lake George before all the eelgrass, left. My
Those
rookie
are some
year,
wild places.
Oh man, my rookie year on St. John's River when there was at least 40 or 50 boats on the southwest corner of Lake George.
Yeah.
I mean, it was mind blowing. I mean, every 5 minutes somebody was hollering and yelling because they just landed a 7 or 8 pounder they caught off the bed. And, we're all in a 5-acre area and can see what everybody's doing. So it can be a mental game if you let it. And the main thing you have to do is tune it out and concentrate on each and next cast that you're going to make and just worry about what you're doing and kind of tune everybody else out.
Great tips right there. The one thing I'll try to do is, I'm not necessarily watching what kind of techniques maybe somebody else is doing. I'm obviously going to be very similar to Brock, concentrating on what works for me. But I will say, particularly like if you're fishing a stretch of reeds and there's 3 or 4 other boats or eelgrass like that, pressure will move fish a little bit. And if you see a lot of people up inside, maybe I'll move back out a little bit. Just that change of maybe a foot or 2 foot of water depth, and those fish maybe get pushed out from some of those pressures, then you can capitalize on maybe an extra bite or 2 just by doing something a little bit different than what the majority of the crowd might be doing. So I do try to sometimes take a peek over my shoulder and make sure, well, this area hadn't been hit quite as bad as that 1 acre. So let's see what's going on in this acre over here. So, but it's interesting how those dynamics play out sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
Brock, next up, our listener question segment brought to us by Nitro Performance Bass Boats. If you'll take this question on, a listener sent in through our Instagram page, Benny Gebbs out of Missouri. He asks, I've noticed for me, funny, this is the question. I guess we're going right back to jerkbait. Maybe you can give him some Hank information too, right?
Yeah.
He says, I've noticed for me that jerkbaits sometimes lose more fish than they catch. What is something that you have done to combat losing those critical fish? Also, how can someone who's just learning to use a jerkbait apply those tactics from a kayak?
Well, like I said, traveling with the best jerkbaiter there is, in my opinion. He's taught me a lot the last 3 years. And one thing you have to do, no matter what brand jerkbait you're throwing or buying, the first thing you do when you take it out the box is change the hooks. Put some hooks on that you're confident in and comfortable in. And you kind of have to be careful changing the hooks out on the jerkbait because it can change the action. It can change the way that bait suspends. Some guys will just change the back two hooks or the back hook and the front hook and leave the middle hook. You kind of have to play with it. And one thing I like to do is play with the jerkbaits in the swimming pool where I can see how changing a hook may affect, whether it's the size of the hook, the brand even. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of things that can change that jerkbait's action. And there's sometimes some of these fish, they want that jerkbait where it's sitting up when it's paused. There's some of them that you sometimes fish, they want it pointed down. Playing with those jerkbaits in the swimming pool, you see how that makes that bait react to each adjustment. So you're able to know when you're on the water, okay, well, they don't want it this way. Let me try it the other way. Let me try it with this bait sitting pointed up or slowly sinking backwards. So jerkbait's a real funny thing to play with, and changing the hooks out is a real key. And also the rod. There's some jerkbaits that are light enough that I'll throw them on the medium rod. But if I'm throwing a heavy jerkbait like an old Rogue, I have to use a little bit beefier rod to make it have the action it needs to have, like a medium heavy. So there's a lot of variables that go into jerkbaits. And jerkbait's one of them high-tech questions that not necessarily the Mississippi guy is going to be able to answer the best. But those are a few of the things that I like to do when I'm playing with my jerkbaits. And like I said, taking mental notes of how each little hook, and there's some guys that even get as funny as just changing the split rings. A jerkbait's a real technical bait.
Yeah. And don't you think, Brock, concerning the kayak question, you're sitting down lower, closer to the water versus standing right on the front deck of the boat. Would you maybe suggest using kind of a shorter rod so that you can, because like you mentioned, the action of the jerkbait has a lot to do with that. And if you can't get those twitches right or that cadence correctly, if you're trying to work with a real long rod that you might get away with, on the front deck of a bass boat, might be a good tip perhaps for a kayak.
Yeah. The bass boat guys work jerking down, of course. A kayak guy, he can't do that. So he's going to have to jerk side to side. And one thing that might be helpful is him maybe using a little bit deeper running jerkbait so it can still kind of get that depth, even though he's jerking left and right instead of north and south, so to speak. That would be one thing I would tell him to do. Try jerkbait, a little bit deeper jerkbaits. That way, you're getting a little deeper because, if you're using just a regular Rogue, for instance, and you're jerking side to side, well, that bait's probably only getting a foot, maybe two under the water surface. But if you use, for instance, a Megabass 110, a +1, well, even though you're not jerking down, that bait's probably still able to get down 4 or 5 foot. A jerkbait's a hard bait to learn how to use, but if he's from Missouri, that's a good place to learn how to use a jerkbait, especially this time of year.
Yeah, you got that right. I'm fortunate to where I get to experience some of that myself. Well, Brock, thanks for a great answer to that question sent in from Benny. And Benny, remember, we need another thing from you, and that is to simply log on to BassEdge.com, click on the Claim Your Prize tab, fill out the information, and as we've said many times before, you are going to receive free money, a gift certificate to spend on whatever you want from Midway USA, where they have a huge selection of fishing products and really all things outdoors. And you can get just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors.
And a continued reminder, BassEdge listeners, got those Midway USA gift certificates passing out to these fantastic questions everyone's sending into the show. So keep them coming. If your question is chosen, then, of course, we're going to send you that gift card, and just keep commenting on our Facebook, Instagram when we fire out those requests for listener questions.
Well, Brock, certainly enjoyed you being with us on BassEdge Radio. Wondering if you have any final thoughts as we conclude kind of this segment of the show.
I just appreciate you guys having me on. It's that time of year where we're all kind of itching and scratching to get on the water. Everybody's fresh out of the woods. They're ready to start fishing. And, here in February, some of the best times to be on the water. So good luck to everybody. And, like I said, I enjoyed being on with you guys.
I appreciate it, Brock. It's certainly the time of year to catch the new PB. If there's a time of year when it's going to weigh a little bit more, this is definitely the time of year, this pre-spawn, kind of late winter. And we look forward to watching you catch some big fish out on tour this year. Thanks again for taking time to be on the show. Best of luck kicking that season off down there in Florida as well. I know that I feel like you're going to have a great year, Brock. It's going to be the one, and hopefully some of those goals and aspirations that you have will be met as you've been meeting many of those over these past several years. Y'all stay tuned. Aaron and I will return with some final thoughts. Hold it right here on BassEdge Radio.
You know the importance of protecting your investments, so why use anything else other than the original and toughest DIY keel protector for your boat? Megaware KeelGuard. Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our exclusive contoured edge and patented technology. Megaware KeelGuard keel protectors are made tough and made to stick. Their do-it-yourself installation takes less than an hour, providing the longest-lasting, most dependable keel protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Developed specifically by boat builders offering the best keel protection in the industry. Also from Megaware KeelGuard, Skeg Guard, Flex Step Pro, and Pontoon Guard. So give your boat the performance edge. Put on the protection the pros pick. Megaware KeelGuard.
The Powerpull Charge Marine Power Management Station is the most advanced system of its kind available on the market. It does the work of 3 devices, a traditional battery charger, a charge on the run, and an emergency start system, all in one compact unit. The Charge lets you run your boat's accessories the way you want to run them by allowing you to monitor and control your power usage through the Powerpull app. It automatically devotes power to the batteries that need it the most for maximum efficiency. The new Charge from Powerpull. Power where you need it, power how you need it, power when you need it.
Kurt, Brock mentioned a couple different times during the interview, he doesn't really see himself kind of as winning a lot of tournaments, but consistent. And, not to try and get cute with something, but the dude has taken several second place finishes. And I don't know. I think he does pretty well. I mean, I don't know what you have to classify as a winner, but
I think obviously his key is he wants to be he mentioned he wants to make 15 classics. There's not a lot of anglers can say they've made multiple classics like that. When you start getting to that double digit teenish, number of classics made. So obviously that's one of his big goals, but guarantee you when he walks off a stage after watching maybe the final person weigh in that took the championship, he wants a piece of that action. I think he understands that you can't force that. So maybe mentally he's trying to back burner the fact that, hey, I'm not going to focus on the win. You've heard it over and over again that wins just happen. And it feels like, he's when he finishes second, seconds just happen. And when he has really, really good success, it's just a process that develops throughout it. And he's not really forcing anything to get in that position. I feel like he's mentally in the same comfortable spot saying, hey, look, I don't need to go out there and do something crazy to try to win tournaments. Winning tournaments is going to happen if I stay consistent. So that's kind of my take on that. Obviously, Brock has entered a level of new consistency over the last 3 years, and it seems like that's been a progression in his life from all competitive aspects, taking it back from his baseball days and high school into college with baseball and now into his professional fishing career. So it's cool to see that he understands where his progression kind of place.
For sure. And I think it's important, and I appreciate him bringing that up, because I think even as weekend anglers, recreational anglers, whether you're competing or not, it's always a competition against the fish. But the reality is, the different phases, right, of being an angler, and then kind of jumping up to that next level, right? And what is that trajectory? Of course, that depends on many things, time, dollars, all of those things play into that. But just recognizing where you're at and then being willing to take inventory to be able to put the things in place, or taking the steps necessary to kind of get you to that next level. So certainly appreciate that. I tell you something else, Kurt. I quickly, I know we're running out of time here, but I do want to make another mention of Terry Battisti with the Bass Archives. Getting on that site just brings back so many memories. I can remember as a kid, right? All I ever wanted was a conversion van and a bass boat to go tour the country and be an angler.
Yeah, where I grew up in Virginia, Kurt Lytle was running one of those like minivan type deals, and that was a trend. The cool thing too about Bass Fishing Archives is, man, there's some stuff in there that predates my time. This whole thing in the late 60s and early 70s. I mean, I was born in 72, so I was just a little wee dude, didn't know jack from Chinola, wasn't reading magazines, and seeing those all come back and seeing the YouTube videos and things, that there's a lot of things now that is really, it was gurgitated back then as now is being regurgitated now, just with some slight variations. But, the history of bass fishing, just like, the history of the world, takes on, just reinventing itself. And while it reinvents itself, it reproduces what it's done in the past as well. So it's fun to see that stuff. And even with some of the offshoot things that they had back those days that just didn't catch on in the world of fishing, it's neat to see where some innovative and whether it's a technique or a product that they talk about there on Bass Fishing Archives, that was like, why would they ever even try that? Right? Exactly. I'm sure we've seen that in our own days as well. But yeah, great stuff, man.
Well, I can still remember, it's probably been 25 years ago now. One of my highlights was when I had to pick Ray Scott up from the airport one time, and it was just he and I. We had about a 30-minute drive, and that was like because he was all things bass fishing. I mean, he is the reason, the godfather, right, of the sport. And so seeing everything that's going on Bass Archives brings back a lot of those memories of why I got into the sport. But unfortunately, Kurt, we are out of time. What another great episode, and just want to encourage everybody to send in those listener questions for the Midway USA gift card. If your question is chosen, be sure to stay up on all things Bass Edge through BassEdge.com or our social media platform. But it'll be March 1st, next time that we get together. So wishing everyone a very nice couple weeks here. And Kurt, in the meantime, have fun, stay safe, and look forward to joining the mic with you again here in a couple of weeks. So for Kurt Dove, I am Aaron Martin. So long, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Is presented by Megaware KeelGuard. For more information on BassEdge or to shop at the BassEdge online store, visit BassEdge.com. And be sure to join Kurt Dove and Aaron Martin right here on another episode of The Edge, brought to you in part by Nitro Boats, Lucas Oil, ProtectTheHarvest.com, Midway USA, Mercury Marine.